Donald Trump. Thank you for being with us on the Savage Nation.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Donald, we're only interested in one question, and I heard some of your interview today, and that is the Islamo-fascist attack in Belgium. I know that you are shown to be 100% right by this attack when you said that you wouldn't admit any more Muslims into the United States until we, quote, figure this thing out. You're 100% right, but here's the question, Donald. What would you do about the radical mosques in America? Would you agree right now in the Savage Nation that you will consider closing the radical mosques in America? Because even liberal France has been doing this since the Paris terror attacks. I have to repeat this. Liberal socialist France, even they have closed about 20 radical mosques because they decided that they want to live. Mr. Trump, what do you think should be done?
Well, we have to have tremendous surveillance, and that includes the mosques, whether we like it or don't like it. We have to be intelligent people. You see what's going on. This is worldwide. Protection is ridiculous. The one they caught last week, he knew everything that was going to happen. In fact, these bombs went off today, they say, because of him. And he knew everything that was going to happen, Michael. And frankly, people that were in his neighborhood where he grew up, they were protecting him. They knew he was there. They have pictures of him shopping in grocery stores. It is such a disgrace what's going on. And people aren't turning them into the police. They want to practice Sharia law. We have to do something, and we have to do it rapidly because the whole world is collapsing, and nobody wants to be, everybody wants to be politically correct. They want to be, we don't want to do this. We don't want to say anything that's wrong. In the meantime, we have planes flying into the World Trade Center, into the Pentagon. We have shootings happening in Paris. We have where, by the way, the toughest gun laws in the world, so everybody had a gun except for the good people. And they didn't have a gun, and they were helpless. At 300, you have many, many people injured. You had 130 people at least now that are dead, and many, many to follow them because of the tremendous injuries, Michael. And then you had the 14 people in California killed by the two people that got
absolutely in San Bernardino. But Donald, we know that this terror is coming from one place. We know it's not coming from Buddhists. It's not coming from Jews. It's not coming from Christians. It's not coming from Hindus. It's coming from one place. And we cannot condemn an entire religion. But on the other hand, we can't be blind to the fact that all terrorism is coming from the Holy Book. I'm not asking you to confirm it because they'll crucify you if you said I agree with you. You don't have to agree with me, Donald, but when you're president, we need to change things or we're not going to survive this.
We will change things. And don't forget, I'm the one that called for a temporary ban on coming in. I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on. You just look. I mean, these people aren't coming from Sweden or Norway or Denmark or, frankly, from China. They're coming from a certain part of the world. And we have to be smart. And we cannot be politically correct. Everyone's so afraid to mention anything. They're so afraid to use the term. We have a president who won't even use the term radical Islamic terrorism. He refuses to use the term. And yet he's over in Cuba, and, they don't even greet him at the airplane. And then you look at the news conference. It was the most humiliating-looking news conference I've ever seen a president have. I've never seen anything like it, where he had no control whatsoever of the news conference. He just stood there, and you saw his speech today. So, look, we have to have a president that's going to use the term and going to say it like it is. There is a massive, massive problem with radical Islam, and whether we like it or not, that's the way it is.
Donald Trump, the NYPD had the finest anti-terror unit in America until this year when the ACLU in New York City sued the NYPD and forced them to delete from their website an 80-page document on how to survey mosques, how to detect the terrorists before they struck. They made them remove that, Donald. Would profiling be part of a Trump plan to combat terror?
I would say yes, and I would say that we did, in fact, in New York City have the finest there is in the world, and many people talked about it. And this terrible mayor that we have a mayor who's incompetent. He's terrible. The terrible mayor of New York, current mayor of New York, is de Blasio, everybody in New York is up in arms over what's happening in the city. And on top of everything else, he totally got rid of that unit. And people involved in that unit say it caught things before they were going to happen. And they,
well, Donald, that's the point. They said in Brussels today that they were trailing under surveillance over 300 young Muslim men for a long period of time. They knew who they were, and they couldn't arrest them. Their hands were tied by the liberals. It's the same here, Donald. How many hundreds of them are being followed by the DHS, FBI, you name it, and are getting away with a potential murder right now? We don't even know, do we?
Costing our country a fortune, and we don't want it. We're so afraid to touch anybody. We're so afraid to bring anybody in. They're going to get sued. They're going to lose their jobs, the officers that are in charge, and they know exactly what they're doing. But they're petrified of losing their pension and their jobs. They can't do anything that's a little bit stronger. Now, we play by the rules, Michael. You know, we can't waterboard anymore. I don't know if you know that, but we can't waterboard. We can't do anything. They have no rules. They can do whatever they want. They chop off heads. They drown people in cages, and yet we can't waterboard. We are playing by a different set of rules, and that's not meant for victory. You understand that. That's not meant to win.
Absolutely. In other words, I keep hearing that it's not in the Geneva Convention to waterboard. Well, the Geneva Convention applies to countries that have signed on to the Geneva Convention, Donald. And the last I checked, ISIS did not sign on to the Geneva Convention. In fact, today, after they set off the nail bombs at the airport and the subway, one of them actually tweeted out a remark, Mr. Trump, and he said they were not civilians. That includes the babies who they butchered. They said they were all soldiers because they are part of the Belgian nation which has bombed us in Syria. How do you deal with people who have this mentality other than through the maximum force that we still have and we can still use? And I hope that when you are commander-in-chief, you do consider carpet bombing Raqqa all the way to the edge of the Sunni Triangle.
Look, you've got to use maximum force. You've got to use something very strong. There's never been a situation like this. And, you know, it used to be we'd fight a war and it would be Germany or Japan or a nation, and they'd have uniforms, we'd have uniforms, you knew what the enemy was like. Here you have no idea what's happening. We're taking in thousands of people from Syria with no credentials. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where they come from. Some are young, strong men. They could be fighters. It could be the ultimate Trojan horse. Michael, it's a disgrace. And I'll tell you what, I think it's one of the reasons, and I wish it weren't for this reason, that my poll numbers are so high. You know, I'm cracking now 53. One of the polls just came out. I'm at 53% with other people in the race, and it's unheard of. And I think one of the reasons is they know I'm not going to play games. This is crazy what we're doing. It's crazy.
Donald, you know, my last book was called Government Zero. You're too busy to have read it. It came out when your book came out, and I'm mentioning it not to plug a book. It's no longer being sold in that way. I'm mentioning it because in the book I talk about radical Islam's war against the world for the last 1,400 years. This is not a product of invasion or occupation. This is a product of the mindset of Islam itself. 1,400 years. And, Donald, I've not asked you for anything, but I'd like to suggest that if you do achieve the presidency, you consider using me as part of your kitchen cabinet for $1 a year, because I have an awful lot of knowledge that I could add to that kitchen cabinet. I can guarantee you that you'd never regret that. $1 a year is all I ask for.
No, you're common sense. I mean, it's all common sense, much of it. You look at some of these decisions that are being made. Look at Hillary Clinton with what she did. Look at the horrible decisions that she's made. And now she's running for president. She's horrible. And she's
Donald, she just said an hour ago that she wouldn't close the borders even after the Belgium attack. She came up with the same mantra that it's not the American way. Well, you know what the American way is, and that's called survival. And what we must do is do what you did. Say you would do. Build the wall, close the borders to radical Islamists for sure. But, Donald, what do we do about the radical mosques that are operating as we speak, teaching hate, preaching hate, sending out young soldiers into the streets to kill us? Even in liberal France, Mr. Trump, liberal France, socialist France, Mitterrand, Hollande, he has closed down about 20 such mosques. Why are we afraid to look at the enemy in his strongholds?
Yeah. And of all places, you're right. It's true. By the way, Hillary Clinton also thinks our vets are being taken care of beautifully, and she said that, and it's a disgrace. Our vets are being treated horribly, horribly. They're being treated worse than illegal immigrants, and Hillary Clinton said they're being treated really well, and there's not a problem there. It's a disgrace.
Donald, you spoke at AIPAC yesterday, and you were received very warmly, despite the left-wing so-called rabbis who tried to castigate you in every way possible. The AIPAC itself saluted you when you were there, which is beautiful, by the way. Isn't it interesting that although the media tried to smear you as anti-Semitic, that you have a daughter who is married to a Jewish man who's having children who will be raised as Jews? How in the world did they get away with this, Donald?
Well, I think the speech yesterday went over very well. I got 12 standing ovations, and I thought the speech went over very well, and I think everyone really liked it. And I got actually excellent reviews, even from normally people that would not give great reviews. They gave me fantastic reviews. So I think from that standpoint, it was a great success. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but it did get very, very good reviews.
Well, the big issue today is only one issue, and that's the attack in Brussels. And at the beginning of the year, again, you called Brussels, quote unquote, a hellhole because of the influences that you saw there. What did you see in Brussels that led you to make that comment way back in January, long before today, Mr. Trump?
I saw a population that has hate, that has tremendous hate. I saw something that other people didn't see. And I hope I'm going to be rewarded for having vision, because I will do a great job as president of this country, and we're not going to stand for what's going on. Believe me, we're not going to stand for it. We're not going to be the stupid people anymore. We're not going to stand for it. And I know Brussels, and years ago I was in Brussels, and friends of mine used to go to Brussels, the most beautiful place that they've ever seen, one of the most beautiful cities. That was more than 20 years ago. Now it's a hellhole. And I said that a few months ago, and I guess somebody picked it up where I was talking about Brussels as a disaster, and I guess I'm getting a lot of credit for having vision and having foresight. You know, I also said that Osama bin Laden should be taken out. I wrote about it to a certain extent, but I talked about Osama bin Laden in my book in the year 2000 before the World Trade Center came down. You know, you have to be given credit for having a vision of things, but Brussels, I talked about that recently as being a terrible place where the police are actually afraid to go into certain neighborhoods where it's radical Islam, and look what's happening now. Isn't it just terrible?
Well, you should take credit for that, because we need a visionary in the White House. And despite the geniuses at the New York Times and at Harvard, I think that we have a visionary in you, and I really wish you the best today. You're up today in Arizona and Utah. Where else are you in a primary?
Well, it's primarily there, and we're going to see what happens, and hopefully I'm going to do very well. And a lot of people are saying this is the only guy that's going to stop this, and it's the only guy with the vision to understand it. And when they see what I said about Brussels and what I said about Osama bin Laden, and, you know, I'm a good prognosticator. I've said a lot of things. I said, take the oil. Remember, you're leaving. Yep. We've been in Iraq, but once we were there, I said, take the oil. Well,
right.
Now Iran and ISIS have the oil. We don't have the oil. We have nothing
right.
except debt. So a lot of people have given me credit for that, Michael. But the credit, I don't want credit. I want to get the job done.
I agree with you. Donald Trump, we wish you the best today in all of these primaries, and we hope you go all the way to the White House, because God knows we need someone who loves America there rather than someone who questions America. Thank you, Donald Trump, for being on the Savage Nation. Ladies and gentlemen,